Absolutely. They're having a conversation about Hamlet. Or wait, sorry, not Hamlet. Notice he's talking about Polonius, my son. Who is Polonius' son? Laertes. So as we open the act, what is it that Polonius is telling Reynaldo? What's he doing? Yeah, take this money and these notes and give them to my son. And then we start these bits here. And he starts to talk about what it is we're looking for. He says, before you visit him, inquire of his behavior. Of course, we're talking about Laertes. Who is he supposed to go and ask about Laertes' behavior?
Who Ronaldo needs to ask?
Mm-hmm.
Danskers?
Yeah. Go find the other Danskers, the other Danish people. Remember, Hamlet is the Prince of Denmark. A Dansker would be someone who is from Denmark. Laertes is from Denmark. So, hey, go to Paris, find the other Danish people, and then he says, and how and who, what means and where they keep, what company at what expense. So, how do these people kind of live? And he says, and finding by this encompassment and drift of question that they do know my son, come you more nearer than your particular demands will touch it. Take you as 'twere some distant knowledge of him, Laertes, and thus I know his father and his friends, and in part him. And so here he checks in. Do you follow what I'm having you do, Reynaldo? He says, yeah. And he says, tell them you don't know Laertes well, but if it be he I mean, Laertes, he's very wild, addicted so-and-so. And you're like, wait, what? He says, and there put on him what forgeries you please. Forgeries being what? Lies. He says, marry none so rank as may dishonor him, not great ones, take heed of that, but such wanton, wild, and usual slips as are companions noted and most known to youth and liberty. Give me some examples of things that you would assume a young man alone at school might do. Sleep around. What else? Gamble. What else do college kids do? Drink, party, fight. Well, if you look right down here where Polonius picks back up, you notice he says all those. He's like, as Reynaldo says, you mean like gaming? He says, yeah, drinking, fencing, swearing, quarreling, driving. Yeah, do it. And Reynaldo's like, but that would dishonor him. He says, no, faith, no, as you may season it in the charge. He says, don't put another scandal on him. That's not my meaning. But breathe his faults so quaintly that they may seem the taints of liberty, the flash and outbreak of a fiery mind. Say that you've heard these things about him. Nothing that's too extreme. Stuff we would expect that a college kid would do. So notice what he's asking him to do. Hey, go to Paris, find the other Danish people, figure out if they know Laertes. And once you know that they know him, be like, well, I don't know him well, but I heard he likes to sleep around. Can you tell me what this likely is an example of? If we had to think thematically, because this is introducing a theme. What theme are we introducing here? Spying. As we get into Act 2, spying becomes a major part of this play. And we see it introduced here. What he wants him to do is to go spy on Laertes. And we're going to get to why am I putting on something he's supposedly done badly. He's going to bring it around here. And so we're going to give Polonius the chance to finish up his conversation with Reynaldo, and then we'll stop and come back together.
Good Lord, wherefore should you do this?
Aye, my lord, I would know that.
Marry, sir, here's my drift, and I believe it is a fetch of warrant. You laying these slight sullies on my son, as 'twere a thing a little soiled in the working, mark you your party in converse, him you would sound, having ever seen in the predominant crimes the youth you breathe of guilty, be assured he closes with you in this consequence, good sir, or so, or friend, or gentleman, according to the phrase and the addition of man and country.
Very good, my lord.
And then, sir, does he this? He does. What was I about to say? Oh, by the mass, I was about to say something. Where did I leave?
At closes in the consequence, at friend or so, and gentleman.
Act closes in the consequence. I meant he closes with you thus. I know the gentleman. I saw him yesterday, or t'other day, or then, with such, and as you say, there was he gaming, there o'ertook his rouse, there falling out at tennis, or perchance I saw him enter such a house of sale, videlicet, a brothel, or so forth. See you now. Your bait of falsehood takes this carp of truth, and thus do we of wisdom and of reach, with windlasses and with assays of bias, by indirections find directions out. So by my former lecture and advice shall you, my son. You have me, have you not?
My lord, I have.
God by you, fare you well.
Good, my lord.
Observe his inclination in yourself,
I shall, my lord.
and let him ply his music.
Well, my lord.
Farewell.
Okay, so as Reynaldo leaves here to go see what he can find and leaves the play forever, let's talk a little bit about what his intention is here. He sums up why he wants him to go and put these falsehoods on his son with one line. By indirection, find direction out. What's he hoping to have happen here?
People will correct him.
People will either correct him or say that he's correct. Basically, we want to figure out what Laertes is doing because we don't know for sure that Laertes is telling us the truth. So go find people that know him, put a slander on him, and by indirection, find direction out. Think about if your parents did this. They would basically be going to your friends and being like, hey, I heard she does drugs. And hoping that your friends would either be like, no, or be like, yeah, she's got the best ones. It's one of those pieces where you're like, what kind of parent does this kind of stuff? Polonius. It helps us to see his character. We also introduce this spine motif because think about what Hamlet is going to do. At the end of Act 1, he told you, I'm going to put on an antic disposition. I'm going to pretend to be crazy so that I can find out the truth of what's going on. This right here. Hamlet's doing the same thing. And so Shakespeare is able to mirror these two and show us that in different ways they're both looking to get to this carp of truth, as he says. We're able to understand the humor in this scene as well. This is supposed to be funny. Now, this is one of those that you're like, I didn't laugh. I didn't hear anybody laughing. What do you mean? This isn't going to be rolling on the floor. Ha 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 ha. This is the funniest thing I've ever heard. But remember that we've said, and the picture in your book kind of shows it, Polonius is an old man. And notice how much he talks. He literally talks Reynaldo through every last thing he expects him to go do and say. And then in the middle of doing all of this, did you catch where he forgets what he's supposed to be talking about? We help to emphasize Polonius as a blowhard and as sort of this busybody idiot through simple things like this. It is funny. It is not necessarily laugh out loud, comedic funny, but it's meant to be at least somewhat humorous after we just had this scene where, oh my God, there's a ghost that shows up and talks to us about his murder and makes Hamlet want to go crazy. Now it's a little bit lighter. We're going to push Reynaldo out here, and we're going to replace him with Ophelia. And so you're going to notice your stage directions are missing. But if you take a look, your red notes are going to help you out a little bit here with this section where he talks to Ophelia. We're going to let it run for a little bit just so that we get an idea of what she's coming in such a hurry about. And then we'll see where the scene goes.
Now, Ophelia, what's the matter?
Alas, my lord, I have been so frightened.
But with what in the name of God?
My lord, as I was sewing in my chamber, Lord Hamlet, with his doublet all unbraced, no hat upon his head, his stockings fouled, ungartered and down-jiveted to his ankle, pale as his shirt, his knees knocking each other, and with a look so piteous in purport, as if he had been loosed out of hell to speak of horrors, he comes before me.
Man, but I love.
My lord, I do not know, but truly I do fear it.
What said he?
He took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then goes he to the length of all his arm, and with his other hand thus o'er his brow, he falls to such perusal of my face as he would draw it. Long stayed he so. At last, a little shaking of mine arm, and thrice his head thus waving up and down, he raised a sigh so piteous and profound that it did seem to shatter all his bulk and end his being.
Oh,
That done, he lets me go, and with his head over his shoulder turned, he seems to find his way without his eyes, for out of doors he went without their help, and to the last bended their light on me.
Okay, let's talk about Ophelia's state of mind and what caused it here. Do you recognize that she came in a fluster? Why is she so bothered?
And let's find out his act as a crazy person.
Bingo. Hamlet is putting his plan into motion. And notice, even though this has been a few weeks, we can guess that maybe there have been other things done. But the first example that Shakespeare wants to give us of Hamlet's madness is Ophelia, because she is a pawn. Hamlet knows well enough the relationship between Ophelia and her father, and he knows if I mess with her, I can get the reaction I want. And so let's look at what he does. She says she was sewing in her closet. Your notes kind of tell you there. Don't assume that closet means the same thing. She's not sitting in a dark, unlit closet. A closet would be an interior private room. So she was sitting on her own when he comes in. How's he dressed?
Like in his undergarments, I think.
Yeah, so his shirt's open, it's not buttoned and done. His pants are pulled down. He doesn't have a hat on his head. She points out knees knocking. Remember that this is a drafty castle in an age with no heat. And so they're in Denmark. Denmark is a cold place. And so if you're in any kind of state of undress, yeah, you're going to be cold. Your knees are going to be knocking. He comes in and he does what? Yeah, he takes her arm and he kind of stands out at a distance, and it says he puts his other hand over his eyes and he stares at her as though he's studying her to paint. Think about how you would closely examine something that you're going to draw or paint. And so he's looking, he doesn't break eye contact, and then he sighs and then leaves the room. How?
His eyes closed.
His eyes aren't closed. It says he leaves without the use of his eyes. He-
Backward?
he's walking this way, but he keeps his eyes focused on her. He stares at her the whole time. Oh, it makes it even worse. Why does Polonius think he's doing this? He doesn't use the word lust, love, and that's important. Notice how quickly when she starts to do this, he's like, mad for thy love? And look at her response. I do fear it. Hey, where did that word fear come from? In her mind, in terms of Hamlet? If you remember back to Act 1, before Laertes left to go to France, he gave her that whole speech and he said, fear it, Ophelia, fear it. Fear Hamlet's feelings for you. And so here, as she's like, I fear that's what this is because my brother told me because of all this. And so we notice here, and it's going to be what drives it. Polonius is like, he's mad for your love. He's going to talk about the fact that this has been happening. Hamlet has shown these scenes of not quite being right for a few weeks. And so he thinks he has solved the problem, and he is going to be pushed to action here as we end the scene. Consider all of you are young females, roughly Ophelia's age. Imagine that something like this happened to you with a boy that you liked. And then think about what Polonius is going to, a boy or a girl, someone you liked. I'm sorry, my bad, to assume. Don't assume your gender. Assume that you're in that place, and then look at what Ophelia or what Polonius is going to say. Hey, here's what we're going to do. And just think about that from your perspective. If your dad was this quick to just do this, ooh, would you trust him? Would you be comfortable? We're going to talk about that as we finish this scene.
Come on, go with me. I will go see the king. This is the very ecstasy of love, whose violent property foredoes itself and leads the will to desperate undertakings as oft as any passion under heaven that does afflict our natures. I am sorry. Have you given him any hard words of late?
No, my good lord, but as you did command, I did repel his letters and denied his access to me.
That hath made him mad. I am sorry that with better speed and judgment I had not courted him. I feared he did but trifle and meant to wreck thee. But beshrew my jealousy. For by heaven it is as proper to our age to cast beyond ourselves in our opinions as it is common for the younger sort to lack discretion. Come, go we to the king. This must be known, which being kept close might move more grief to hide than hate to utter love.
He's not going to say, come, okay. So she presents all this. I'm freaked out. Oh my gosh, this guy came and did this. And what is his first thought to go do? Let's go tell the king. How many of you would be really cool if your dad's first thought was, oh my God, not, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Oh, I hope you're okay. But instead to be like, let's go tell my boss so I get a gold star. Dang. Like, it helps us to see not just this relationship between the two, but Polonius' character. He is a sycophant, man. He just wants that praise. He wants to be the one to solve the problem here. He also does check in with her. Did you do what I told you to do? Have you cut that boy off? And she's like, yeah. And he's like, oh, that must be what did it. You cut him off. Now he's longed for your love, and he comes and does these things. Ooh, look, I solved the problem. He thinks he's the universal genius. But what we get here is that concept reinforced that this poor girl is under her father's thumb. The fact that the first thing she thought to do was to come and tell him, and then hear that the first thing he's going to do is go tell the king, she is not being well taken care of here by her father. And we get this. So we push this. They are going to enter scene 2 in a moment. But if you look here where we begin scene 2, we're going to introduce 2 more characters here. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. The king and queen are going to talk to them. And Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are 2 guys who, they're like childhood friends of Hamlet's. Now, I want you to think about friends that you had when you were younger. Maybe people that you hung out with a lot. and your parents still ask you about them even though you haven't hung out with them in years, and they assume that you're still friends with them. Do you have somebody in mind like that? I just want you to keep that in mind as you hear how they're going to talk here. We're going to reinforce our concept of spying. So be looking for that. As the king and queen converse here with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, we're going to give all the way here, we're going to go to the introduction of Polonius and then stop. So we'll hear their conversation with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern in whole.
Welcome, dear Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
My lord.
Moreover, that we much did long to see you, the need we have to use you did provoke our hasty sending. Something have you heard of Hamlet's transformation, so I call it, that nor the exterior nor the inward man resembles that it was. And what it should be, more than his father's death, that thus hath put him so much of the understanding of himself, I cannot dream of. I entreat you both, that being of so young days brought up with him, and since so neighboured to his youth and humour, that you vouchsafe your rest here in our court some little time, so by your companies to join on to pleasures, and to gather so much as from occasion you may glean, whether aught to us unknown afflicts him thus, that opened lies within our remedy.
Good gentlemen, ye have much talked of me, and sure I am two men that are not living, to whom you are appeals. If it will please you to show us so much gentry and goodwill as to expend your time with us a while for the supply and profit of our home, your visitation shall receive such thanks as fits a king's remembrance.
Both your majesties might, by the sovereign power you have of us, put your dread pleasures more into command than to entreaty.
But we both obey, and here give up ourselves in the full bent to lay our service freely at your feet, to be commanded.
Thanks, Rosencrantz and gentle Guildenstern.
Thanks, Guildenstern and gentle Rosencrantz. And I beseech you instantly to visit my too much changed son. Go, some of you, and bring these gentlemen where Hamlet is.
Heavens, make our presence and our practices pleasant and helpful to him.
Aye. Amen.
Okay. What is it that the king and queen want Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to do?
Fix Hamlet.
What?
Fix Hamlet.
Not fix.
Like
To what? They're hoping that maybe they could bring some light to it, but I don't think they're expecting that these guys are going to solve the problem. Not at all.
they want to entertain.
Yeah, they want him to entertain, but they're aware that he's different. And so they say, I'm going to look at his line, starting line 10 with the king. He says, I entreat you both that being of so young days brought up with him, and since so neighbor to his youth and behavior, that you vouchsafe your rest here in our court some little time, so by your companies to draw him unto pleasure, or to gather so much as from occasion you may glean, whether aught to us unknown afflicts him thus, that opened lies within our remedy. They're not so much interested in getting these two guys to fix him as, can you get him to open up to you and figure out what's wrong? Again, we're going to bring this spying thing in. Now, these are two guys that used to know him as a kid, and the king kind of pulls to that. Hey, you knew what he was like back then. I want you to think about that friend that you don't hang out with as much that your parents ask you about all the time. If your parents saw a change in you and they were like, I have to talk to one of their friends to help us out, the equivalent of bringing in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is like your parents calling that kid that you don't hang out with anymore and being like, hey, I know you're friends with my son or my daughter. Will you find out what's wrong with them because you used to hang out with them? Would it be weird if that person all of a sudden comes up to you out of nowhere and it's just like, hey, buddy, what's up? How you doing? Would you be like, why are you talking to me? What are you doing here? You'd know something's up right away, right? So we notice here, these are parents trying to solve the problem. But we also want to talk a little bit about what the queen says. She agrees with the king, but I want to point your attention to one line. What do you do with lines 25 and 26? What's a king's remembrance? Anybody want to take a guess? How could a king remember somebody that does something for them?
A proclamation or decree, or like just give them something that's super expensive.
Yeah, give them something that's super expensive. Think in the case of your parents, right? Asking that kid that you're not friends with anymore to check up on you. What's an easy way that they could get them to do it? Offer them money. Now, if this was really your friend, would they take that money? No. Obviously, if you're friends with somebody and their parents are worried, you would naturally want to help. But look at how Rosencrantz and Guildenstern react. Do they say, oh, no, you don't have to pay us, we'll help out? Nope. They're right there. All right, yeah, we'll do what we can. We got it. This helps us to inform the relationship between Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and Hamlet. This helps us to understand these two guys before we go any further. We understand what the situation is and we get it, but we're not going to see them interact with Hamlet yet. We're going to pump the brakes on this and give us a chance we'll get there. Instead, they leave and we notice that Polonius is going to come back in. Now, Polonius, imagine that he comes in dragging his daughter behind him, but practically running. You know that walk that you do it's not quite a run, but it's almost a run, and it looks more like a skip at times because you're just hustling? He is so on point to tell them. He's the kid that's like, he's just there. But he's going to give the floor first to Voltaman, who is returning, of course, from Norway before he decides to talk. He's even going to express his news as the dessert to come. It's so good. He wants that gold star from the king. And so we're going to let it run with Polonius's bit and then Voltaman's bit, and then we'll talk about it.
The ambassador from Norway, my good lord, I joyfully return.
Thou still hast been the father of good news.
Have I, my lord? I assure you, my good liege, I hold my duty as I hold my soul, both to my God and to my gracious king. And I do think, or else this brain of mine hunts not the trail of policy so sure as it hath used to do, that I have found the very cause of Hamlet's lunacy.
Oh, speak of that. That do I long to hear.
Give first admittance to the ambassadors. My news shall be the fruit to that great feast.
Thyself do grace to them and bring them in.
My lord.
He tells me, my sweet queen, that he hath found the head and source of all his unrest.
I doubt it is no other but the maid, his father's death, and our poor hasty marriage.
Well, we shall sit in. Welcome, good friends.
My lord.
Say, Voltaman, what from our brother Norway?
Most fair return of greetings and desire. Upon our first, he sent out to suppress his nephew's levies, which to him appeared to be a preparation against the Polak, but better looked into, he truly found it was against your highness. Whereat grieved that so his sickness, age, and impotence was falsely borne in hand, sends out arrests on Fortinbras, which he in brief obeys, receives rebuke from Norway, and in fine makes vow before his uncle never more to give the essay of arms against your majesty. Whereon old Norway, overcome with joy, gives him 3,000 crowns in annual fee, and his commission to employ those soldiers so levied as before against the Polak, with an entreaty herein further shown that it might please you to give quiet pass through your dominions for his enterprise on such regards of safety and allowance as therein are set down.
It likes us well. Then at our more considered time, we'll read, answer, and think upon this business. Meantime, we thank you for your well-took labor. Go to your rest. At night, we'll feast together. Most welcome home.
My lord.
Okay. So we have two parts to this. Let's start with the first part with Polonius. If you flip back and take a look at his little bit that starts it, most actors will not emphasize their lines in the way that we want to. So I'm going to overemphasize what Polonius is saying here to help you to understand the tone and how we should read it. You notice we said he comes in with that giddiness that he has. And he, starts by announcing the ambassadors from Norway are returned, and the king pays him a compliment. Thou still hast been the father of good news. And you see on the side it says, you always bring us good news. And notice that he starts, have I, my lord? Let's emphasize this a little bit. He's being cute, and so he's like, have I? Oh, he says, assure you, my good liege, I hold my duty to you as I hold my soul, both to my God and to my gracious king. Oh my God. And then he goes even further. He says, and I do think, or else this brain of mine, it hunts not the trail of policy so sure as it hath used to. My brain doesn't work as well as it used to. That I found out the cause of Hamlet's lunacy. And so the king's like, yeah, talk about that. And he's like, oh, you find out the good news here from Norway and let my news be like the dessert at the end of a feast. Ugh. It is so overly, sickeningly sweet from Polonius. He's this little kiss-ass, brown-noser who just wants his star to come through. Give me my little pin and let me show everybody that I'm the best. People get confused then when Polonius leaves before the ambassador comes in because the queen is standing right there. And yet the king turns and mansplains everything that Polonius said to her. The purpose is not because the king is stupid. The purpose is to get Gertrude's thoughts out. Notice what she says to the king. When he's like, oh, he solved it. She said, I think it's because we got married too fast. And Claudius is just like, oh, we'll see. Gertrude is saying the obvious truth. She gets it, but no one else wants to be clear with oh, well, maybe it's something different. Now, Voltemand returns from Norway, and he gives us all the update. He tells us, hey, the old king of Norway didn't know what his nephew was doing, and so he slapped his hand. And he told him, okay, well, since you have an army anyway, how about you go attack the Polish people? Now, this is where there's a definite issue with geography at play here. Because you notice the question that comes from Norway is, can we send our troops from Norway to march through Denmark to get to Poland? Geographically, that doesn't really work. So don't worry about that. But instead, think about it this way. Here's a dude that assembled a secret army to come and attack you. And now that king who has found out the truth is like, well, would you be okay if I march this army across your land so I can go get that other land instead? This would be like your bully saying, hey, I want to beat up that kid next door. I'm tired of beating you up. I want to beat up that kid next door. Can I cross your lawn to go beat up that kid next door? Are you going to be like, yeah, sure? Or are you going to know what's going to happen? Is that kid not going to beat you up too? You should know, likely. If you invite this kid over who's your bully, he's going to beat you up, and then he's going to beat up the other kid. Maybe he'll beat up the other kid first, but he's coming back to get you. And so here, if you're Claudius and you're such a good king, should you be open to this idea of letting this army cross your land? You should be like, no! But instead he's like, that's a great idea. Let me think on that. And you're just like, oh, no, this is dumb. Don't do it. Don't do it. But helps us to see Claudius. We are going to pick up tomorrow with Polonius's news and his presentation to the king, as well as our first chance to see Hamlet's antic disposition in action. Keep in mind that